You're listening to Permission To, the podcast where we dive into the science and soul of owning your worthiness as a perfectly imperfect human being. I'm your host, Sam Dew, psychotherapist, positive psychology coach, mama to a beautiful 5-year-old Amelie, and passionate advocate for living an inspired life. My aim is to show you that you have full permission to own your worthiness so that you can embrace your true nature and begin walking boldly toward your dreams. Let's dive in. Hi lovelies, welcome to another episode of Permission To. This episode is really something that is going to be relevant to most of us. Let's face it, if you're a human, it is likely at certain times of your life, you have experienced moments of worry about what others think of you. And at times that might just look like, fleeting thoughts like, oh, I wonder if that person likes me, or I wonder what they think of me, or I wonder what they thought of, this behaviour or this event that happened. But also at other times, it can not be fleeting. It can be like a constant worry. And the problem that the point where I think worrying about what others think of us becomes a real problem is when we start to filter who we are, when we stop showing up bravely because we care more about what other people think of us than about our own needs, our own hopes and dreams. So that is what this episode is about. And I'm going to be sharing a bit of a controversial opinion about a popular saying that's been going around a lot lately about others and their thoughts on us. And I'm also going to support you in this episode to learn how to detangle from your mind and still take action even when you are worrying what other people think of you. And I just want to acknowledge that this is a very nuanced conversation. And so I'm going to have some opinions that you might not agree with. And as always, I really see all of my listeners as their own sovereign beings. And it's okay if you don't agree with me, take what you want, leave what doesn't serve you, always, always. The first thing I want to say, so the controversial opinion, let's just get that out of the way first. There's this saying, it's been going wild on Instagram. It's very popular in quotes. It's none of my business what others think of me. This is what's been going around a lot. And I think it's a really popular quote. It's very inspiring because it's very empowering, isn't it? To think, well, it's just none of my business what others think of me. But my interpretation of that is when we say to someone, it's none of your business what others think of you, we are literally saying, just stop thinking about what others think of you. Stop caring what others think of you. And this is why I believe this is one of the most unhelpful sayings I've seen lately on Instagram. There are many unhelpful things on Instagram. Always be super discerning with what you're reading, with what you're listening to on there. Because, of course, everything can be very nuanced, whereas on Instagram it's presented very black and white. But so when you say to someone, it's none of your business what others think of you, you're essentially saying to them, stop thinking about what other people think of you, stop worrying. And as someone with a background in psychological therapy, 20 years experience supporting humans, and there's also a lot of evidence about this, that when we tell our brains to stop doing something, to stop thinking about something, I bet you can guess what happens. Actually, often that causes us to think even more about it. And so whilst it is a very empowering quote, it's not necessarily really supportive for people because most of us as humans can't just stop worrying about what others think of us, because actually it's part of our survival. And it's just part of what makes us human, to think about what others think about us and to care about what others think about us. So the first message I want you to hear from me is, if you do worry about what others think of you, if you do care about others' thoughts on you, just know that that's actually a really normal, really human response. And it's actually part of the way that you have been built. Your mind and your body has been built to survive. So really, what I want you to think about is that this is a part of our evolutionary history. Thinking and worrying and caring about what others think is a survival instinct. And so this is really important to understand the context. So I'm just going to go into this briefly before I talk about how you can kind of move through this worry. So firstly, because we have always been social creatures and we've always relied on group dynamics for survival, if you think about it, in our early history, humans lived in small groups and we relied on each other for protection, food, and shelter. So we needed to be liked. We needed to be accepted by the group. This was actually like a basic need, a basic requirement to survive, to live. And that need for social acceptance and validation is still present in our modern lives in many ways. We still crave approval from others. We still worry about what others think of us. And that's because our brain is hardwired to seek out that social acceptance because it's been crucial for our survival. And so this is really important. Worrying about how we are perceived by others can actually help us to avoid potential danger. For example, if we're in an unfamiliar environment, and we might notice that someone is giving us like a negative or suspicious look, that could be a signal, that we need to leave the area, that we're not safe. So some sense of awareness of what others are thinking about of us and how others are responding to us is important. But obviously, as we've adapted, as the world's become safer, we don't need to worry as much as we have in the past. And but sometimes it can be really, really hard to switch off that process because our brains have been doing it for generations. And so what I want to talk to you about is, in general, mindset work isn't about stopping thoughts like, oh, that's an unhelpful thought, I'm just stop thinking that. And it's something, it's like one of my biggest frustrations with the coaching industry is that I hear so many stories of life coaches, business coaches just telling people, stop thinking that way. Our brains just don't work that way. And so hopefully it's supportive for you to understand why humans worry about what others think and why it's actually such a normal response. And now I'm going to talk you through what we can do, because I don't generally think that we can necessarily stop worrying. So what we can do instead of worrying, instead of trying to stop the worries, is one, recognize, as I've said, that this is actually normal. It's part of it's a part of the human condition. We've always done it for survival. And so actually normalizing it and accepting it, that it doesn't mean anything about you if you are worrying what others think of you. And then, of course, now we go on to the thought work. So instead of stopping that thought, what you can do is to recognize that the thoughts that you have about what other people think about you could be fantasies. So just like our thoughts are not always true, in fact, often they're not true, the thoughts that we have about how other people think about us are essentially fantasies. So for example, you might think that someone's given you a funny look on the bus, but actually they were daydreaming and, thinking about something else, or maybe they're worrying about a problem in their life, but it just seems to you like they're looking at you. Or you might have a fantasy that someone doesn't like you, but actually they're really intimidated by you, or they feel really shy around you. So firstly, recognizing that we are not mind readers. There is no accurate way that we can know what someone thinks about us unless we actually ask them. And so that I find is really, really supportive first. So recognizing that other people's thoughts, that we don't know what people are thinking about us. We're not mind readers. But also, what if someone does actually not like you or think some negative thoughts about you? The reality is that not everybody likes us. I'm sure there are people out there in the world who have negative thoughts about me or who have judgmental thoughts about me. That is a part of life, right? Especially if you're a business owner, you're putting yourself out there online. It's just inevitable that we can't be liked by everybody. And I think actually making peace with that is, something that can be really, really empowering. But the other thing to think is, just because someone has a thought about you doesn't mean that's actually true. Just like our thoughts aren't always true, other people's thoughts about us aren't always true. So if someone has a thought, this person talks too much, or this person, I don't like them, they're not a good person, or whatever the thought is, or this person's boring, like that is their thought, but don't let their thought define you. I think that is often what I find when we dig down beneath what's going on, when we're worrying about what others think of us. It's a fear that their thoughts are true. So if we think someone doesn't like us, or that they're judging us, deep down that might be fear, well, I'm not good enough. And that's why they're thinking these thoughts about us. So if you can break free from that meaning making, so you could be like, okay, well, actually, I know this person is having this thought about me. Maybe they've told you or something like that. That doesn't mean that it's actually true. For example, I think I've used this example before, that I was told that I was bossy. So I knew that person actually did have thoughts that I was bossy. But then I got to decide whether that was true or not. And I was like, actually, I'm just being really assertive right now. And perhaps that makes that person uncomfortable, or they've labeled it as bossy, but I've actually decided that I'm being assertive. So always remember that ultimately you are the one that gets to choose how you think about yourself. No one else gets to choose that. And other people's thoughts about you are obviously influenced by their learning, their social conditioning, the patriarchy, all of those things. So for example, when I was called bossy, that person has been conditioned to think that, women shouldn't speak up, women shouldn't speak their mind, women shouldn't be direct. There was all of those things, whereas obviously I disagree with that. I very much believe that women need to be empowered to be able to have their voice and speak their mind, no matter what other people think. So, and this is a third step that is really important, like recognizing that we can't control what other people think about us, but we can choose what we do. So if it feels like it's safe to do that, obviously it depends on the environment, but being assertive, even though that person thinks you're bossy, going for that job interview, even though you've been told that person thinks that you're not good enough for the job. Or let's say you're mind reading, imagining like you think that someone doesn't like you, but how do you actually know that that's true? So maybe at an event that you're at, you go up and you say hi to them and you speak to them and like test out your predictions. So often we have these predictions in our head that people don't like us, or that they think certain things of us. And that makes us be distant from that person. But what happens when you actually go and test out that theory and you go and talk to them? Maybe you realize that they've just been like really focused on other people at an event, or they're someone who kind of doesn't initiate conversation as much. So ultimately, this is something I teach in Permission Granted and with my one-on-one coaching clients, that we don't need to change our thoughts or to stop our thought patterns to be able to live the life that we desire. So just because you have a thought or a worry about what other people think, that's not a problem. That's actually very normal, very human, as long as you don't let that worrying control how you're showing up in the world. And this is where that imperfect action, showing up anyway, even though you feel uncomfortable, even though you're worrying about what other people think, give yourself permission to show up, to be brave, and to go, you know what? I don't know what they think. And even though I care what they think, because I'm human, I also can't control what they think, and what I want matters more. And so I'm going to show up. I'm going to go for my dreams. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to be brave. And it's okay if they don't like me. So I hope this episode's supportive. So just in summary, there's 3 really important things to remember when it comes to worrying about what others think of you. Firstly, it's not something that you can just stop doing. In my experience, trying to force ourselves to stop thinking a certain way does not work. In fact, it often increases more of those kind of thoughts. Secondly, actually worrying about what others think is and has been a survival instinct. And so our mind and our body has actually been built that way. And so accepting that is actually really normal and it doesn't mean anything about you is really important. And thirdly, like we can still do mindset work around this. So remembering that, one, you don't actually know what other people think about you unless they've told you. And so recognizing that a lot of this is fantasies, recognizing that if people are having thoughts about you, they don't get to define you, you do. And so if they do have thoughts, they are very likely untrue. And then recognizing that no matter what's going on in your mind, part of mindset work is actually learning to support your nervous system, do the breathing, do the relaxation, but then take action, so don't let your thoughts control what you do. And don't get so caught up in your thoughts and thinking that you've got to fix this problem. Like, I've got to stop worrying about what others think of me before I can do this or before I can do that. No, it's absolutely okay to have these very normal worries, but you can still go out and live your best life. So I hope that this episode was supportive. I am currently in the process of calling in the next round of Permission Granted. So we are going to be running Permission Granted twice this year, and the next round is starting in August. But I have a really beautiful way that I can support people who are on the wait list or who decide to commit to Permission Granted for August, so that they can get some support and some amazing bonuses and access to me as a coach whilst they're waiting for Permission Granted to start in August. So if you were someone who was like really, really close to actually doing Permission Granted this year, like starting in February, but it just felt like it wasn't the right time, then please reach out, and I'm really, really happy to chat with you about this special offer that I have created for people that want to start in August. And I would also be so grateful if you could leave a 5-star review so that I can get this podcast out to more and more women who really, really need this. So that's it from me. I will chat to you again next week.